When we started Sankalp, the idea was to reach a maximum number of people, and especially those who are unreached, and give them some hope, give them some sense that life can be better. Having been a drug user myself and gone through a process of rehabilitation, in the early days, I found that there was no one available for people on the streets. I got into drugs at a very early age of 15. And I have used most drugs available in the late 70s and up to 83. I quit in 83. So about 8 years of my life. I did suffer a lot. And when I did go for help, I realized that people were struggling even to give help. It was a trial and error basis. They were trying to learn how to do it. I was also part of an organization that dealt with middle class, people who could afford to pay for treatment. And therefore, there was a total neglect of people on the streets. And I was a consultant and worked on the streets of Manipur and Nagaland from 92 to 95. And when I realized that, this is the kind of work that should be done in my own city, so I came back and started Sankalp. It inspired me that something I'm doing on the streets far away in the Northeast is required to be done in Mumbai, but nobody is doing it. That's when I decided Sankalp should do it, and I started Sankalp in January 1995. We started our work on the streets of Mumbai, and then we had these drop-in centers started. Initially, even NACO wasn't doing this kind of work. So we started through the European Commission. It was a 5-city intervention, and I was involved in the Mumbai city one, where we began doing harm reduction work. So we were giving a substitute drug called buprenorphine, which is an opiate, but sublingually given. So unlike methadone, it doesn't make a person feel euphoric. So it just cuts off all withdrawal symptoms, and the person taking that drug on a daily basis can be functional. So the same drug users who were stealing, who were not giving anything back to their families, were now able to earn and take care of some of their responsibilities. And they're not buying illicit drugs, which means it's not going towards narco-terrorism, where it finally does go. So that's the biggest harm reduced, A large number of migrants, they have come as children to Mumbai, and that we see even in our children's center. And many of them come because they may be in large families and they're pushed into child labor. So they run away from situations where there's an alcoholic father beating them up or just being pushed into work. And they come here and they live on the streets, and the street culture, to survive, you do like your peers do. And that's how they are into this drug scene for 28 years, 38 years. So many of these migrants are like that. And those who haven't yet died, they come to us, you can say. Many of them lose their lives early. So the injecting drug in Mumbai was basically brown sugar, which is a crude form of heroin. So this is, till today, the mainly injected drug in Mumbai. Recently, there's something called MD, but MD is not an opiate. So the opiates, like brown sugar, heroin, can be substituted by buprenorphine. So if a person takes sublingual buprenorphine, they don't need to inject an opiate. And in that sense, the injecting is taken away. So even the chance of HIV and blood-borne diseases like hepatitis C come down drastically. We have a very, you can say, supervised needle exchange program where we put a lot of emphasis on getting back the used and dirty needles. A lot of talk around the world comes from give as much needles as possible so that people always have clean needles. But in places like France and Canada and Australia, they clean the streets so well that the dirty needles will not remain overnight. In Mumbai, you can't say the same. These needles, dirty needles, remain in pockets near dustbins, near railway stations, near bus stops, and behind shrubs in parks, where the cleaning doesn't happen much. And those can be lethal. People can get needle stick injuries, even rag pickers, and that could also spread blood-borne viruses. So our emphasis is to get back much of these dirty needles, and that is which we put a great emphasis on. Right now, we have 3 drop-in centers. One is at Mumbai Central, one is at Jogeshwari. These are both for adults, and they are mainly for injecting drug users in Mumbai. Those who are not injecting, they also get counselling, and they're referred to the Rehab. But those who are injecting, they get all the harm reduction services. They get what is called OST, Opioid Substitution Therapy, where we give them buprenorphine on a daily basis, sublingually, and they can go about their duties without injecting the illicit stuff. The third drop-in center is at Masjid Bandar, and that is for children who are actually using solvents and other drugs, to give them a safe space and to give them a feeling of what it is to be with normal people and give them a basic idea that you can be happy without drugs. So we give them games and we teach them a little informal education is given, and we have some parties for them just to make them feel good. It's a full feel good factor that you don't need drugs to feel good. And in the center, nothing is acceptable. After they go out, they may use it, but at least for that time, they are not using drugs. And they are with people who are not their regular, you can say, regular confidants and all. So they have an access to a counselor, they have an access to a peer, young boy who helps them also. So that center has a different quality. Those who don't want to take the substitute drug, they can give their old needles and syringes and take exchange new ones, so that they don't misuse these old needles which pass on the blood-borne viruses. And we have a group session every day. We also do testing for HIV, and we refer people for hepatitis C treatment in 2 hospitals, KEM and SIAM. We have a team of peer educators. So 10 peer educators go into the field every day, and they have a kit. So they take away old needles and syringes for people in the streets, give them new ones. They are taught first aid. They take care of open wounds, bandage them. They refer them, if it's very bad, to hospitals. And they generally give the message of how it is to stay clean and how Sankalp can help. We have a rehab center at Vasai, and we only take people of their own volition. The person must feel the need to come to the rehab center. It's different from the rest of the rehab centers in Mumbai, which have mushroomed overnight. They have what is called pickups. So if the family is willing to pay, and even if the drug user is not wanting to quit, they are told to pick them up from their homes, which they charge 5,000 or 6,000 for a pickup, and then they keep them against their will in the rehab center. For me, it doesn't work. I myself have been in a rehab center of my own volition, and I've seen how you can only change yourself if you want to change yourself. Our program is a 4-month residential center, and it's divided into 2 months of really taking care of yourself and 2 months where you learn to take care of others, so the newcomers who come in. So the focus on the first 2 months is knowing yourself, understanding your feelings, understanding how these feelings push you to take different actions. So sometimes anger, you are throwing it around, you're beating up people, abusing people. So how to channelize anger in different ways, or how much of hatred is there towards your own family, but realizing that you have actually built this yourself because you have caused everyone in your family a lot of grief and affected their lives in a big way. So the whole understanding yourself in the first 2 months is a big factor. In the second 2 months, we make them a big brother of a newcomer, and we give them some responsibility of planning, like for the kitchen, what things are needed. So they have to learn how to plan as well. We want that they should be responsible for themselves and their families, take care of their children and their aging parents, both. And that responsibility, we make it quite clear. We just have a doctor and a psychiatrist. The others are counselors, and the counselors also, besides, say, a master's in social work who may be in charge, we prefer ex-drug users who have recovered, minimum 4 years out of drugs, and they're willing to be counselors. So we have one now who's 30 years out of it, so he's a counselor. And we have one who's just recently, but who's giving his time there. So they are better to deal with the day-to-day problems. We have very few people, but we have a very good response in the sense that those who come out, most of them are successful. We have more than 80% success with those people. Nivara was basically started here in these premises when we had a problem long back when HIV positive people were not getting admitted in hospitals. The idea behind Nivara was that people get care without discrimination. So a person who needs care is desperate for it. We get a lot of people who are like you think that they may just die anytime because they are absolutely emaciated. Because when they're taking drugs, all their money goes in drugs. By chance, they might get a vada pav from someone, they may eat it. They don't eat food, they are just taking drugs, some of them. And with HIV, they go down very fast. So we needed to have a place where without discrimination, people would give them some care. And that is why we started Nivara, to care for them. Of course, I did not want to take away the burden of it from the hospitals. So this was a place where they would get till we can get them into a proper hospital. Later, as things became better over the years, Nivara has been transformed into a halfway home. So people who finish in our rehab, but in the rehab they were limited. They were just maybe going and doing a little shopping, buying the daily provisions before they left from there. We want to give them more exposure here where they would go out and work on a daily basis, sometimes in our own projects as peer educators on the streets, and see how they can avoid getting back to drugs. Once we are sure of them, sometimes if they have families, the family help, they go back into the mainstream. So till they go back into mainstream, they can stay in Nivara. That also could be 15 days to 2 months to 4 months. Disha is at Vasai, which takes care of detox and rehab. So we cater for people who may want to get off the substitute drug and want to spend maximum of a month there. And we cater for people who are in a 4 months residential setup as well. More than 25,000 people have directly benefited from Sankalp. But if I count my traveling throughout the country, a lot more indirect benefit has occurred.